Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
I'm not cold either. Those who do not recover, people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program, usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They are such unfortunate. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we were like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures avail us nothing. We stood at turning point. We asked his protection and cure with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took which suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we are entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaim, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like personal adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is, we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapters of the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholics and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could ever relieve our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if he was sought. Thank you. Is the doctor in the house?
Thank you, Barney. The next gentleman will be Ralph S. from Ogden, Utah, who I had the pleasure of meeting for the first time in Denver, and it's very special to me. He will read the 12 traditions.
Hi, I'm Ralph Searle from Ogden, Utah, and I am an alcoholic. In the 12 traditions, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. For our group purpose, but there is but one ultimate authority. A loving God is seen express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise. These problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based upon attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Thank you, Ralph. I always feel intimidated by these things. I feel like they're staring at me. The first gentleman that's going to be one of our Alcathon speakers tonight is Ken, and he said if I couldn't pronounce the name of the town that he was from Portland. So it's my pleasure to introduce Ken from Portland.
Good evening. My name is Ken Savaloya. I'm from Tigard, Oregon. And I am an alcoholic. I brought up my last name like that so you can understand why I did most of my drinking. By the time I got through telling them how to spell my name, much less pronounce it, my throat was rather parched and I had to go have a drink usually. So that's part of the reason. When they asked me to serve on this panel, or participate in this assembly, I was to serve on a panel. And I accepted because usually when I'm asked to do something in AA, I do my best to go out and do it. They sent me back to schedule, and it turned out I was a speaker. Now, I had kind of mixed emotions about that because I am not a speaker, and I don't know what in the hell I was going to tell you people that you haven't heard before. So all I can do is try my best. I'm probably like a lot of the other people in this room. I drank too much for too long, and it got me into trouble. I used to think when I was new on a program that at one time I was a social drinker. And the longer I'm on this program now and think back, the more I know that I was never a social drinker. I always drank for effect, even from the first time that I ever had a drink. I too am an ex-Navy man. And I remember when we got out of boot camp and went down to New Orleans, Bob mentioned New Orleans, and it is a drinking man's paradise. It really is. I don't remember getting to New Orleans from Great Lakes, Illinois. I remember getting into Memphis, Tennessee, and from there on it was a total blank. I do know I got aboard the ship down there, and from then on it was constant drinking. I always thought that I wasn't a blackout drinker, and some of these things are just now filtering back into my memory. I remember one instance that I went out and started drinking on a Saturday afternoon, I believe it was, and somehow or another throughout the night I wound up in Tallahassee, Florida. Now in New Orleans, Bob knows they have the trolley cars there. Sunday morning, early Sunday morning, I came to on a corner in Tallahassee, Florida, waiting for a trolley car. And to my knowledge, they didn't at that time, nor do they have now, ever had any trolley cars in Tallahassee, Florida. But I was waiting for it. My drinking was off and on while I was in the service. It gradually progressed up until the last 10, 15 years of my drinking career, when booze became a constant companion. Where I went, booze went. It went to bed with me also. It was always with me. Wherever I went, it was within reach. I became quite a person where I could hide my bottles. I was quite handy with the tools when I work as a mechanic, and I don't like working on automobiles and trucks, but I do that as a living. And I kind of hate working at home, but I did take work home to where I could get away from my wife. If we weren't talking, I could go out in the garage and drink and work. And yard work, I hated that too. But I got to where I hide in my bottles. I could hide them under the rose bushes, under the garbage cans, in the garage, under the bed, any place that I didn't think my wife would find them. But she had a nose like a bloodhound. It was a kind of a rat race on the weekends. I'd go out with the lawnmower and she'd be one step ahead of me, picking up my bottle. You know, after you come on a program, you hear a lot of different places to hide bottles. I came on a program in Long Beach, California, and I thought I knew of all the hiding places. We'd go on a trip. I'd have a bottle in the trunk, one in the engine compartment, and one under the seat. So we'd get so many miles to the shot. I'd either have to check the spare tire, check the oil in the engine, one thing or another. And then this guy was talking on TV in Portland one night, and I had never thought about this other hiding place. What he did was put his booze in the windshield wiper container, you know. And he'd get thirsty, and he'd go out there and check the windshield wiper and suck it up through the tube. We had one dear little gal in Portland. She was quite a booze hider also. She'd get drunk at night and she'd hide her bottles, but then she'd put a note on her pajamas where she hid a bottle at. So, crazy people. But as my drinking did progress, it actually became my God. It became my life revolved around the bottle. Whatever I did, where I went, anything concerned with my life, the bottle was the boss. It came ahead of my family. My wife wound up in the hospital one time, and she was very ill. I found out later she was very close to death. But at this time I was in a kind of a drunken stupor. I couldn't get away from the bottle long enough to go down and see her, and at the same time I had 2 young children at home. And old boss Booze told me that I had to go out and get a drink. Now these children were less than 6 years old. But that didn't stop me from going out and leaving them home alone at night, caring for themselves, never knowing whether I was going to get back or not. But I did have to have the booze. As many of you know, it got to where I had to have the booze to live. It was a running battle. I mean, every waking hour of every day, 7 days a week, 352 days a year, I had to drink. It was pure and simple. There was no other way out. I never lost a job from drinking, though I probably should have. I was always drinking. I just happened to be in a capacity that I was at the end of my drinking, I was service manager in a truck shop. And I could go out and road test these trucks, and naturally I would have a drink along the way and get well. Along with just what Bob was talking about, the fear, we all hear about this fear that comes with drinking. And that's, when anybody mentions fear, I can really identify with them. My fear got so bad that I could literally not go any place or do anything by myself. I couldn't go 2 blocks from home by myself. It was literally impossible. I got afraid of high places. I got all the phobias that you could speak of. Claustrophobia, whatever they call it, aerophobia or whatever it is up above. But the insanity part of it was that what does any normal alcoholic do when they're afraid of height? I'll tell you what I did. I went out and started taking flying lessons. And drinking and flying at the same time. The only thing that cut me out on that, I started soloing, and I come to enough on one of my first solo flights, is I got to thinking, Jesus, Ken, what in the hell are you doing up here by yourself? And 2,000 feet up in the air, that's not really a place to start figuring that out. And then the phobias. Going down the road, and the booze, I was never without booze in my vehicles, knowing full well that if the cops ever stopped me, I was going to go to the pokey. And I was scared to death. I think, thinking back now, they have a place in California they call it Camarillo State Hospital. And I was deathly afraid of that place. I was deathly afraid of Norwalk, which is a booby hatch. I was definitely any place that had bars on it I was afraid of. But that didn't stop me from boozing, going down the road drunk. And I lost my train of thought. Oh, I was going to tell you, going down the street boozing. I got to thinking about it not too long ago that I never did give the cops too much trouble in California either. I made it kind of easy for them people down there. I had this problem of going out and getting drunk. Then I had to drive home. But I also had this sleeping problem. I'd get about halfway home, and I'd pull up to a stoplight, and I'd probably go to sleep and sit there and wait. I'd sit there and wait for the cops, and they would oblige me by coming and pick me up and take me to the pokey. Anyway, I did get to AA, and my first meetings, they were, I do think that things happen for a reason. I was led to this program for some reason, and I'm finding out slowly but surely why. The person that 12-stepped me, the guy that took the call, he isn't the one that actually come to my home, but the one that did come, and here again I'm sure that was for a reason. He was very well involved and still is in service work, and that is where I have always been in my AA life. And to the first meeting I went to, I always had visions of an alcoholic meeting, of all the, Skid Row drunks, which was totally different. So I'm sure that happened for a reason. The second meeting I went to, I always like to tell this, it's identifying with people. This fellow was giving his AA pitch, and he was telling how he always wore socks to bed when he went to sleep at night. And maybe some of you people can identify with it. I surely did. He had a terrible sinus problem, always draining. And when he went to bed at night, he'd take and lay the newspaper alongside the bed, and the sinus would start draining, and he'd have to spit at night, so he'd spit on the paper. And the reason that he wore the socks to bed, he didn't want to get out of bed in the middle of the night and step in that barefooted, so he wore it. And so I immediately identified with him. But AA has been good to me, and I've grown a lot. I've gotten rid of all these fears, and she's telling me to shut up. That's it's been real good being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, very much. The next speaker I'm going to introduce is another very special person to me. I had the privilege of meeting for the first time again in Denver, Al M. from Hollywood, California.
Hello, everybody. My name's Al Marino, and I'm an alcoholic. I'll have 36 years of sobriety next month in Alcoholics Anonymous. I guess I'm the oldest goat in the joint, ain't I? You should live so long. The group that I joined in Los Angeles was the first group on the West Coast. We had 34 members. And we got thousands. I know down there we got 50,000 in Southern California alone, from that first 34. We had the book. We didn't have anybody from New York to guide us, thank God. We didn't know even how to start a meeting or what to do at a meeting, so the founder, Mortimer J., decided to read the portion of Chapter 5 would be a good idea because that's the basis of our sobriety. So that's where that started. That was the format started. And then some ding-a-ling in the joint decided we ought to recite the Lord's Prayer at the end of the meeting. And believe me, it hit the fan. I never saw so many fights in my life among 34 guys. They were throwing chairs at one another and everything. Now they're going to make a religion out of this thing. We've all been through that, recite the Lord's Prayer at a meeting. Who ever heard of a thing like that? So, after wasting 3 weeks of arguments and throwing of chairs, we took a vote. And you know they won by 1 vote. So now they got the Lord's Prayer. Now in those days we were very, very jealous of the sobriety in AA. AA hadn't proved anything really. Maybe there were 1,000 members in the whole United States. And I guess Cleveland had quite a few, and New York had a few, and that was about the size of it. So no one was so sure that this thing would really work, you know. So we were jealous, and when you walked into the meeting as a newcomer, they'd say, do you want to stay sober on an all-time basis? And luckily I said yes, because they'd throw your fanny right out the door if you didn't say yes. So there were a couple of guys in the group that kept getting drunk on us, and they'd go into a bar and they'd get drunk and say, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they were ruining our reputation. So we had a couple more meetings on this, you know. So we passed the law that anybody that got drunk 3 times, he couldn't come to AA anymore. So at the next meeting, we're now meeting over upstairs at 2200 West 7th, which was the mother group there. And we put 2 of the biggest guys we had in the group at the top of the stairs. In fact, one of them was a wrestler, so you can imagine how big he was. And we said, if those guys come up the stairs, throw a mass over tin cup right back down those stairs. And the meeting started, and everybody's listening. You hear the thumping, you know? And just then, one of the boys, one of our members, his name was Pete Cunningham. Now, they're all dead but 4 of us of that group. So I can break their anonymity, you know. Isn't that right, Pete? Yeah, that's right, Al. So he said, I've got the book, and this is what we had. All we had was the book. In fact, that's all you really need. All your answers are in the book. And he says, it says here in the book that anybody with an alcoholic problem is welcome to AA. It doesn't say how many times they get drunk. So it screwed up the whole deal, all that time wasted. Now, in those days, we had a little ad running in the paper like they do in the small towns, you know, and the ad says, if you have an alcoholic problem, write to Post Office Box so-and-so, and at the bottom we put Alcoholics Anonymous. So a lot of ding-a-lings wrote to this Post Office box, and at the meeting every Friday night, they would take these letters, which we call letters of inquiry. Now they call them cold turkey calls. But they were letters of inquiry. You get a half a dozen, you take one out every night. You see, that would take care of your activity for the week. You know, you want them to call? Mary B., Glenn B., Salt Lake City, is that? Telephone outside right away. Mary B. or Glenn B. Telephone outside. Lake City Group. Oh, Lake City Group. Oh, I didn't know that. I said it was Salt Lake City. All looks the same to me right now. So, in those days, we didn't have that unwritten sort of a law, that precedent that has been set up in AA, and we should observe it more, I'll tell you that, whereby a male should not call on a female, and a female shouldn't call on a male on a 12-step call unless accompanied by one of the opposite sex. You know, we get in some terrible, embarrassing positions in these things, you know. A babe calling, a man calling on a guy. We had one woman in AA then. So this big, good-looking guy from Beverly Hills, and I hated his guts because he had a Cadillac and he had a lot of diamond rings and he had his watch yet, too. So he gets this call and he decides one sunny, beautiful Wednesday afternoon he'd look this up. So he looked at the address, and it was in a very ritzy area of Beverly Hills. So he flounced over there and he touched on the old doorbell, and a beautiful broad came to the door with nothing on but a thin nightgown and a highball in her hand. He says, I'm from Alcoholics Anonymous. She says, I wrote a letter to him. Come right in. I'm a little tired today, as you can see. Come back, I'm lying down. So he followed her back to the bedroom, and she laid on the bed with a jug, and over here's a table with all kinds of fine booze, and he looked at this, he pulled a chair up to the bed, and he started giving her the AA pitch. And of course, then he got drunk with her. And then he got in bed with her. And then her old man came home. And he sued AA. But he couldn't find us. So ever after that, at every meeting they would announce, don't you dare call on a woman or unless you're accompanied by a woman. You know, Alcoholics Anonymous gives us a 100% guarantee that we will never drink again if we live according to certain conditions as honest as we possibly can. Alcoholics Anonymous gives us a 100% guarantee that we will stay sober the rest of our lives if we live according to certain conditions as honest as we possibly can. And I remember one time one guy says, I haven't the ability to be honest anymore. And the leader says, in the book on page so-and-so, it says, the willingness to try. Just the willingness to try alone will do the job. You know, if we live according to these conditions, which are the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, every waking hour and every day of our lives, we will definitely have a change in our personality and our attitudes and our sense of values. When we have this change, which is possibly unnoticed by us, but is noticed by our family and our close friends, we have this beautiful change whereby, as the book says, something happens to us. And the thinking of a drink is getting further and further away. And all at once we find out that we're sober a week, a month, a year. And this miracle has happened to you and me. I know it's a miracle as far as I'm sober. I know it's a miracle as far as all of us are sober. There's only one thing that can cause a miracle. And that's a power greater than ourselves. God as we understand Him. But we have to do the footwork. We have to take the action. And the old saw that God helps those who help themselves is as true in this great miracle that it is in any other walk of life. God helps those who help themselves. So if we practice these conditions and do the footwork, we will get the help of this power greater than ourselves. And as Bill says, after the steps, which are really the steps, A, we admitted that we could not, our life had become unmanageable. And 2, probably no human power could help us. And I can say you can leave out the probably as far as I'm concerned. No human power could help me. But God could and would have sought. And unbeknownst to me, by following these conditions to the best of my ability, as honest as I possibly can, I actually was asking the help of this power greater than myself, because I was doing what this power wanted me to do, at least in my own way. And you know, it's a miracle. And it's very practical, too. And you do know that the practical man is a spiritual man, because he does what he's supposed to do when he's supposed to do it. So practicability and spirituality are exactly the same things as far as AA is concerned. I came into AA, and I stayed sober, and I was a musician in the studios down there. I was a trombone player, and I didn't get any work. They'd all caught up to me at the same time. And the first year I was sober, I made $1,400. From $14,000 a year down to $1,400. I couldn't understand it. But you know, after a few years, I looked back and I said, that was all God's will. That was supposed to be that way. All the hell that I went through, pre-AA, was all God's will. Because I had to go through these things, and I had to be beat to death, and I had to lose all my friends and my family, and everything that I ever held dear to me. I had to do these things. This was all God's will. I had one friend in the world before when I came into AA, and that was my girlfriend. And you know, she caught me after I was sober for a year, and we've been married now 35 years. And I break her legs regularly. She's just getting over them. I broke her ankle 5 years ago, and I broke her knee here the other day. 5 months ago. She's just awkward. She just falls in her can. I never saw anything like it. So I couldn't understand this, and I got up in one of the meetings, and we had a bunch of tough guys. There were 3 of us were less than 40 years old when I came in, and they're all old goats and meaner than hell. One night I says, I used to make more money when I was drinking, and one of the old tough guys says, well, why don't you go back to drinking? I says, I don't wanna. He says, okay, sit down and shut up. So after about 6 months of this, I went to the leader of the group. His name was Frank Randall. And he held us together because AA had started twice in Los Angeles and had fallen to pieces. And old Frank was tough. And Mort was just opposite. But Frank held it. And I went to Frank one day and I says, Frank, do you know anybody in the music business? And he said, no, why? And I said, I need a job real bad, and I thought you might have an angle. And he says, my boy, this is not an employment agency. This is a place to stay sober. He says, what's your number one problem? And I says, alcohol's my number one problem. He said, okay, take care of your number one problem, and everything else will take care of itself when it's supposed to. He says, you might not get a job for 5 years the way you kick these people around. But you'll eat and you'll have a roof over your head. And from now on until they put you 6 foot under, worry about one problem. And you get everything in this world that you deserve, and most likely a lot more. And to this day, I've thought about that at least every day. I've got one problem, and if I take care of that problem, everything else will take care of itself. Can I go a little longer? To hell with it. Christ, I'm just getting started, and she wants me to stop. About 2 more minutes. 2 more. I begged her for 2 or 3 more minutes. There was a wonderful musician there in Los Angeles by the name of Fizzy. And he was playing on CBS on radio in those days, and his little guy stood about 5'6", had pudgy hands, and he played like an angel. Getting about $500 a week in those days. He had a beautiful home in Santa Monica, 2 cars, a couple of kids, a wife, everything is beautiful. And Fidgy started to drinking. And by God, he was a drunk, it seemed, within a year. He was a hopeless, helpless alcoholic. He lost his job, he lost his family, and now he's playing in these piano bars for about $50 a week. All he owned was a tuxedo and a stiff shirt, and this was it. He got a job way out on the edge of Los Angeles at a piano bar, $50 a week. He goes out and checks it out. He's got no car, so he has to find a room, so he found a room close by. And then he cased the whole neighborhood. And he went from the bar over to the room, and he found a shortcut through a little cemetery. And you know what he did? Every morning at 2 o'clock, when he was blind drunk, he'd follow that little path through that little cemetery, and he'd be home in 10 minutes and never got pinched. One morning, he's real drunk, and it's kind of cold and bad weather. And Fidgy started through this little cemetery, and by God, he got off the path, and he fell in a hole that was dug for a funeral the next day. And here's a poor little bastard at the bottom of that hole, tuxedo on and everything, reaching the top of the hole, and he's screaming like a Comanche, and he can't get out. About dawn, an old wino come wandering through this cemetery, and he hears this screaming. And he went all over the cemetery, and here he finds little Fidge down at the bottom of the hole, spread-eagled out, absolutely exhausted, tuxedo on and everything. And the wino says, "What's the matter down there?" And Fidgy says, "Get me out of here, I'm freezing to death. Get me out of here, I'm freezing to death." The wino looked at him a minute, and he says, "Well, no wonder you're freezing to death. You kicked all your dirt off."
Oh, wow, you're beautiful. The next speaker is, I feel like I'm really fortunate tonight because, when I got the notice if I would chair this, I thought, well, gee, I don't know anybody and all that, but the way AA works, I've met most of these people and have had the privilege of knowing them over a period of time, and just sort of, I guess, a fringe benefit. And another one of my fringe benefits tonight is to introduce Gladys T. from Las Vegas, who was in our fair city of Honolulu last November, and I had the pleasure of meeting her and knowing her then. Gladys.
Hi, everybody. I am Gladys Toussaint, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm a real alcoholic because I drank between drinks. I had mixed emotions about Al, whether I wanted him to keep on talking so I'd have a little more time to sit there, or to quit talking so I could get up here and get it over with. I'm not funny. I never was, and never will be. The only time I ever got a laugh when I was talking was I was telling that the first time I passed out, I was 14 years old, and my boyfriend at that time, who later became my husband, took me home and laid me on the porch. I was very, very serious, and I didn't know why everybody was laughing. And they told me after the meeting we're going to build our porch out here in the club a little bigger so I could laugh. I don't remember my first drink. I know that I wanted to drink long before I ever started to drink. And I know the first time I was 86, I was 13 years old. And I just told you the first time I ever passed out, I was 14 years old. And I got married when I was 15 years old. We didn't have the pill in those days. And I had my first child when I was 16 years old. And when Stephanie talked tonight about the killer resentment, this was my first big resentment. I resented my son, who I loved dearly then and still do, and my first husband, because I blamed them for interfering with my life. They were the cause of it all, and all the plans that I had, I wasn't able to complete because of getting married at that age and having this child. I also was married to a wife beater and a chaser, and all the while I was carrying this boy, he chased. And I made up my mind then that I would never, never be dependent on anybody again. If I ever got out of that situation, no one would ever do anything to me. And that's the way I lived my life. It was self-will run riot. Things must go my way or else. I've been married several times, and all of my marriages, it's very obvious, all of my marriages have lasted 7.5 years. And this one ended after 7.5 years. And it was a situation that I just could not accept. It was a failure that I couldn't accept. It was unheard of in my family and my religion to divorce. And here I was, a 22-year-old woman with a 6-year-old child, divorced. I thought my life had ended then, and also the war was on, and that added to my depression and my feeling of hopelessness. And I started drinking I had started drinking when I was 13 years old, but at this point I drank to a blackout point, night after night after night, for about 3 years. And eventually I met a soldier who was being discharged and was moving to San Francisco and asked me to be his wife, and so this was an out for me. My reputation was ruined in the city in the little town of Colorado Springs, and it was a wonderful thing. It was my first geographic. I would move to San Francisco and we would start all over again. And it was fine, and things were just great as long as it was going my way. But he wasn't ready. He had spent 4 years. He was also a drunk and a chaser. He wasn't wife beater. He wasn't ready to settle down. He had spent 4 years in the Aleutians, and he wanted to have a good time. So things weren't going my way, and the only thing I knew how to do was go to the bar and find myself a male companion who would understand me, and I'd be able to talk to and pour my heart out to. And naturally, another affair would start, and this marriage ended in divorce, too, after 7.5 years. I had to, this 7.5 years is what I always call my fun years. It was the years, I had an attorney that I had to pay every month. He had a fee coming for either getting my husband or I out of jail on such charges as assault and battery, interfering with arrest, waylaying an officer, impersonating a doctor, just plain drunk. I'd always tell, I'm sure many of you know my husband, Dick Toussaint. I'm sure you know him. And I keep on telling him that I'm such a sweet, lovable person when I was drinking. And then he brings up this, you know what waylaying an officer is? He says, that means you used your fist. And I said, no, I never used my fist. And he says, that's what that charge means. So evidently, the assault and battery charge is my charge, too. So evidently, I wasn't as sweet and lovable as I thought I was. But this marriage also ended in divorce, and I met another guy and got married again, and he was moving to Portland, Oregon, and I thought, oh, great, I've lost my reputation in the Bay Area. I couldn't even get a job anymore. I had the reputation of being a lush, and I thought, well, we'd move to Portland, and I'd start all over again. By this time, I was well crossed over into the line of alcohol and alcoholism. I didn't realize it until I'd been in the program of AA for about 3 years before I realized how bad I was at this time. But what I didn't know was that I married a reformed drunk. And if you be alcoholic and you marry a reformed drunk, and his idea was for me to have a drink, I mean, that's when the cat and mouse game began, because I had to, that's when starting the hiding the drinks and the conniving and the, my whole life was how am I going to get a drink? How am I going to get a drink without him knowing it? And would go when he'd give me a kiss, you know, and I had found out that if I took lemon juice and parsley, he couldn't detect the alcohol. He knew I'd had something, but he didn't know what it was. But trying to keep him knowing what I was drinking when I was drinking was really quite a task. It was a full-time job. He was also a long-haul truck driver, and when he was out of town, did I ever live it up? And this one time in particular, he was supposed to come home. He was not supposed to come home that day. He was supposed to come home later, and I found out he was coming home, and the garbage was full of beer bottles and empty whiskey bottles, and I was desperate. And I was supposed to go to work at 10:30, and the garbage people were always there by 10:30, and I called them up, and I says, get here and empty that garbage. It's got to be gone. And of course it did. They didn't come pick up my garbage, so I had to put it in my car, and I drove down the street 3 or 4 blocks and put it in somebody else's yard, because I had to get rid of that. I had to get rid of that I had to get rid of that before he got home. But finally he did come home one time unexpectedly. And I always say that this was a situation that got me into Alcoholics Anonymous the first time, because I got in jail one more time. This time the charge was adultery. And I'm hoping that was my last time. I haven't been in jail since, and I'm hoping that will be my last time in jail. But I don't know where I ever got the thought of going to Alcoholics Anonymous, but if you don't know it, this is serious trouble. And so I thought I'd do anything to get out of this trouble, and so I said I would go to AA. And I did, but it didn't get me out of trouble. It only made things worse. It only got him to investigate further into what I was doing while he was out of town. So the only thing I knew to do was take the Geographic. And so I took my 2 suitcases and I headed for Las Vegas. Now, I don't know why I ever thought of Las Vegas, because I dislike heat with a bitter passion. I've never been cold in my life. It's always too warm for me. It doesn't make any difference where I am. It's too warm. And so I think I went to Las Vegas because I thought nobody would find me there. And incidentally, Bob, that's another place where you can have drinks 24 hours a day. And there is nobody looks at you funny when you drink at 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning. It's all right, and that is really a wonderful town to reach your bottom, or once you reach your bottom, once you get into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's also a wonderful place for sobriety, because you never have to be lonely. It doesn't make any 24 hours a day. There's somebody around, somebody to talk to, and somebody to be with. Anyhow, needless to say, when I found out that Alcoholics Anonymous was not going to get my husband off my back and wasn't going to get me out of trouble, I started drinking. I was glorious, delightfully drunk, and the only thing that I remember about that month of Alcoholics Anonymous in Portland, Oregon, was I thought they said they gave you a sponsor. And they gave me a sponsor, and that's what I thought. And I remember them talking about the big book. I don't remember the steps. I don't remember anything else. That's the only 2 things I remember from that month. But the seed had been planted. And by the time I got to Las Vegas, I forgot all about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I can truthfully say that I completely pushed it out of my mind. I just didn't remember it anymore or think about it anymore. It was just gone. And I really, but my drinking by that time was so bad. It was just unbelievable. I identified so much with Bob tonight when he was talking, because I didn't have a briefcase, but I always had my purse, naturally. And I was the only one, when you went to the restroom or went to the locker room, that took their purse with them. Nobody else did. And I'm very, very much aware of that now. If I see somebody taking their purse to the locker room, I think, hey, well, I wonder what they got in there. I also, I call myself the Fremont bum, because Ken reminded me of this, because I couldn't get off of Fremont Street. I worked on Fremont Street, and I lived a block off of Fremont Street, and I drank on Fremont Street, and that was the total extent of my existence, was to get to work, to make enough money to buy my drinks for that day or whatever, and that's all I lived for, was just to drink. I also identify with Ken, because I, too, lose my tend of thought. Oh, this time. Isn't that nice? Now, somebody said last night, don't tell anybody that it's time, and they won't know your story is ended. They'll think that's ended. They don't know you have more. It's very, very obvious that I do have more, but I just want to add one thing, that the things that I've always wanted so much, all my daydreams and all my knight on a white shining armor and all this to come and rescue me and live happily ever after in the big castle, all these little things are coming to me in sobriety. I want you to know that Dick and I have been married, it'll be 7 years for those who know. Wait a minute. It'll be 7 years the 17th of March. We went together for a year and a half, and he's got a year and 2 months more sobriety than I have, and I knew him when I first came into the program. I didn't like him, but I knew him, and so I think we're pretty safe that this one's going to work.
Thank you, Gladys. I'm getting a little paranoid about this timer up here. I'm waiting for someone to turn around and hit me, you know. This next gentleman that I'm going to introduce is from my town, Honolulu. He was there when I walked in the door, and I could say a lot, but I won't. Bob A. from Honolulu.
My name's Bob Allen, and I'm an alcoholic. See, I think the time come out just right. If I play this right, I got about 1 minute to go. My home group is the Wilder group. I have to say that in Honolulu. And another thing that makes me feel real good is that I got to remind myself every day that my number one problem, as Al said, is the problem of the disease of alcoholism. I used to be an alcoholic, and I'm an alcoholic tonight. I'll be an alcoholic until the day I die. But thanks to this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I haven't had to take a drink today, and more important, I haven't wanted to take a drink. To me, that's a real fringe benefit. I think I had problems, with living, has been pointed out tonight. Well, all of the time to most of us. I had problems with living prior to ever having the first drink. A lot of people have problems. I know the common disaster booze brought us to this room, but and we're all sober tonight in this room, I believe. But there's a lot of people in this room, I'm sure of, that got problems. They're out of gear in one department or another. I don't want you to look at them right now, but when I keep on talking, you just sneak a look at the guys that are around you and see whether you agree. It's a funny thing, we can spot this in other people, but it takes a little while, or at least it did for me, to spot it in myself. I could go to a group, a small group, and look around the table, and I could just look at them one by one, and I just really knew that they needed to hang on to this program very desperately. But it took me quite some time to realize that I fit in real tight, and I had found a home, and I was among people that I not only wanted to be with, but among people that I respected and people that I loved. For my drinking, I started drinking in my teens, and I had no problem with it. In my early 20s, I became a daily drinker. In my middle 20s, I guess, I took to the morning drink, the beer on the weekends and that kind of thing. By the age of 29, I had to have hard booze in the morning because the hangovers were getting, real bad. About the age of 30 or so, I had the occasional blackout. About this time, I started running one drunk into another. By that, I mean wake up and I'd be half sick and half drunk, and just continue to drink through the day, through the night, and just go on what you would call a binge. My drinking pattern was that when I was getting good and sick and I couldn't eat anymore, I'd find a place to hibernate. For me, preferably, it was a hotel out of town where nobody knew where I was at. I I was sort of a protected drunk in a way. I had a business, and I was enjoying a certain amount of success in the Far East. I lived in Japan, but I had offices in other places, and I'd always tell one office like that I was going to, Korea, and I'd tell another one the Korea that I was in Okinawa, and I'd head for Hong Kong or some foolish thing like that. I can remember repeatedly being in hotel rooms, and getting through those flip-flop shaky nights, and that half hallucinating, and that half dreaming, and that the things that we have to go through to get over the booze. I can remember, when you finally know that you got it thought out, and you know that you got it made because you can eat a half a piece of bread, or maybe a little rice, with some butter on it, or something like that. Then you knew it was time to, try to pack your bag and negotiate paying the bill and get a cab to get to the airport, to get home, and come home with a story about, how tough business was, and things like that, and have to stop up in an airport arcade and pick up presents and invent stories of what great lengths that you went to and bargain to get these things. I've been a phony most of my life, and to a certain degree, I guess I'll always be a little bit phony. But AA, we're at a service assembly here, and we're talking about AA structure, and I'm one of those that just love rules, and I love, guidelines, and I love things that that you got to qualify in which to do things in AA and all that kind of thing. But I have to also remember how I got here. I used to call a guy up in Tokyo all of the time when I was sick and sorry and sad and remorseful, and he used to come and spend hours with me, and he'd give me AA literature, and I'd throw it away. I'd get sick again, and I'd call him, and he'd give me more literature. And, I'd be so sick that I would need the literature, and I'd read it for 2 or 3 days, and maybe on the 4th day I was feeling sort of good, and I'd see something like God, and then I'd throw the literature away again. This friend of mine got sick and tired of calling on me continually and not being able to take me to a meeting. And he gave me my first rule in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you can't stay sober 3 days, you can't go to a meeting. That rule almost killed me, because anybody knows if you can stay sober for 3 days, who in the hell needs Alcoholics Anonymous? Finally, I got sick in 1962. I was real sick, and I knew that I had to call Alcoholics Anonymous. But I couldn't get that 3 days going together. Finally, one day in January of 1963, I was desperate, and I called up Alcoholics Anonymous anyway. The girl on the answering service, the first question that she asked me is, "Have you had a drink?" And I told her no. I hadn't had a drink for 3 days. So you don't even have to be honest to come into this program. I started out lying. I got real lucky in the beginning, though. Another real, for a guy who likes rules and regulations, and a guy that, should have, in my opinion, a red carpet treatment to coming into Alcoholics Anonymous. I started out lying with this girl. I told her that I wanted somebody to come over right away. I knew it was her responsibility, that she was supposed to send me somebody, because I had read a lot of literature and I had connections in AA. And she knew that she had a ding-ding on the end of the telephone, and as luck would have it, they had another guy by the name of Bud that had come into AA the day before, and they didn't have anybody to watch him, and they had him calling the answer service every 30 minutes to give him something to do. So you guessed it, she put that ding-ding in the car and sent him over to call on me. I can remember to this day when I was in the, getting from my apartment to the elevator was a chore. Getting down the elevator door opens, and here's this car sitting out there right by the entryway. From the elevator, I could see the car, and I could see him looking at me, and I was looking at him. I was too sick to get to the car, and he was too sick to get out of the car to come and help me. And this is the truth. That fellow's still sober today, but he was in worse condition than I was. He passed out on Kapiolani Boulevard the day before. He had stitches in his eyes. He, really smelled of medication. To this day, I have a resentment, I mean, it isn't right. They should screen 12-step callers a lot better. But every time I get serious, too serious for my own good, I remember things like that in Alcoholics Anonymous, because that was a lucky break for me. Occasionally when something happens that isn't just right, or it isn't exactly along the guidelines, who are we as individuals, or who am I as an individual person or a member of Alcoholics Anonymous to judge whether it's right or it's wrong? It's happened, and I accept it. I'm totally in love with this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I reserve the right to make many, many, many more mistakes, because I think it's only through the mistakes that I make and the pain that I have to go through, it sort of allows me to get to know you people closer, because no matter what seems to come about, it seems that we accept one another as we are and not who we pretend to be. And I'd just like to, say one other thing. We're really hung up with this word aloha in Hawaii. And we hear it all the time, and I know it does sound a little touristy and a little commercial, but there's one way that aloha can be used as an AA word as well. Everybody knows probably that aloha is hello, goodbye. It has many meanings, but one meaning of it is the word love. And so I'd like to just close with saying aloha.
It looks like this is the end of the Alcathon, and I would like to thank Natalie and the committee for asking me to chair. It's really been a privilege. I'd like to thank Barney for Chapter 12, for Ralph for the 12 traditions, to Ken, Gladys, Bob, and Al. But most of all, thank you for being here. I've got to interject this. I've just got to. It's awfully hard to stand up here with a captive audience and not be able to say a word. It really is. And one thing, I'm from the Alihi group in Honolulu, the friendly group in Honolulu. And every time I get involved in service, and this is my way to go, I want to say it's Stan Wilsey's fault. Because I met Stan a little over 6 years ago. He was a friend of my family's. And I got mad at our conference that he was attending because they weren't doing it my way. And he looked at me and he says, well, why don't you quit your bitching and get on the committee? And I got on the committee, and I just resigned after 5 years on that committee. So it's Stan's fault that I'm here, and thank you, Stan. I like being here. And thank you all. And Warren, would you lead us in the Lord's Prayer, please? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I hope you've had as much fun as I have.